Krypton meets Marvel, Superman's rival shakes the universe. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 31. Quicksilver and Wanda. The first one, please collect. As if a gust of wind blew, Cyclops, Scott and Storm beside Charles were severely knocked out. Charles was shocked, and when the gust of wind slowly stopped, the guy stopped, and a silver-haired boy with ears on his head came into everyone's eyes. It was him who made Charles's heartbeat impossible to capture for a moment. You're Pietro, Charles sighed. In a trance, he even remembered holding the child. Quicksilver. Pietro with silver hair nodded. Wanda, Scarlet Witch, aren't you coming out? Charles sighed. Offended, Professor. As soon as the voice fell, a beautiful woman in a red coat suddenly appeared behind Charles. A pair of slender arms stretched out, and red fluctuations of origin magic power swept across Charles's head. Outside. These strange origin magic power fluctuations actually completely suppressed Charles's psychic ability, and he couldn't move at all. The initiator was the Scarlet Witch, Wanda, behind him. Professor, we have no other intentions, we just want to take our father and leave. Wanda said gently. Magneto, who just stood up, didn't appreciate it and instead cursed angrily. Who asked you to come here? Come later, you're going to go to jail, maybe we have to buy a cemetery for you. Quicksilver said disdainfully. Although it was a father-child relationship, it was obvious that Magneto had not done much of his father's responsibilities. However, only then did Quicksilver realize that there was a young man standing by the corner with his arms folded, as if watching a play, standing with relish. Well, how could there be a fish that slipped through the net? Quicksilver patted his head. Subsequently, he stepped on his toes and moved. Now in his eyes, the flow of time in the entire world is completely negligible. It can be said that everything in front of him is completely forbidden to move. This is his bullet time. The reason why he was able to defeat the two of Scott without knowing it was that he used this extraordinary speed to send them flying. Definitely, what Quicksilver didn't say is that during this period he even hummed a little song and chewed a piece of it. Bread, and by the way, stuck out a finger and bounced the two of them off. After all, in his realm of time, these people who stood still were like puppets, allowing him to slaughter them. The tall and strong young man in front of him was no different. Quicksilver didn't think much about it, he just wanted to stun the melon eaters who were onlookers. In an instant, he had already crossed a distance of dozens of meters, but suddenly, Quicksilver's heart trembled inexplicably, and a pair of black and white clear eyes looked at him from a distance, and followed closely with his own movements. Impossible. In this time domain, how could a human being like a would react? But the fact is that, when he came to the side, the handsome face had already looked over, and his expression was full of disdain. A sturdy arm grabbed it, and Quicksilver was even more flustered. The speed of the flowing water didn't have the slightest sense of retardation, and it didn't look like a person caught in his bullet time. Panic for no reason, he slammed his body to the side, and with a bang, the strong arm smashed against the wall and splashed dust and dirt. Quicksilver left a cold sweat and stepped on his toes, just wanting to escape the range of this guy's attack. But the other hand on the opposite side flew out. Quicksilver swallowed his saliva and tried to retreat back, but he was completely knocked out by this strong and powerful fist. Bang! At the moment of the hit, his time domain was completely over, and the time flow rate might be less than half a second, and everyone present saw a silver-haired figure blowing out completely. Suchin twisted his neck and said with a smile, I'm standing around watching, and you're still here to provoke me. Pietro, are you all right? Wanda said in a panic. The collapsed Quicksilver struggled to stand up from the ground, with a look of lingering fear on his face. He knew that if he hadn't been caught in his bullet time, the terrifying fist impact would be enough to take half his life. What kind of monster is this guy? Quicksilver was still afraid. This was the first time in his life that he had been defeated in the realm of time. In front of Su Chen took a step forward, but Magneto over there was nervous about his son's safety. The magnetic force around him spurred, and several metal balls flew towards him. Su Chen didn't even look at it, just swiped his right hand in the air, setting off a violent and mighty airflow, and throwing these metal spheres out. Seeing that he was ignored and seriously injured, Magneto was very unwilling, and said with a blood-stained mouth, You think you came to my place and still want to go out? This is a very confident statement. After all, the entire underground facility in front of you is made of steel plate metal. It is not only Brotherhood's nest, but also Magneto's magnetic amplifier. Here, Magneto's magnetic properties are even multiplied, not to mention the metallic structures that pervade the field. Suchin shook his head and just smiled, and stomped his right foot on the ground. Boom! The ground shook, like a giant beast under the ground tossing its body, a little strong earthquake, and all of a sudden, Magneto's crumbling body collapsed to the ground. Magneto, who was already at the end of the shot, was very weak after being absorbed by the instrument for a small part of his life. You stand up first, then talk to me. Suchin smiled. It's too late. Suchin doesn't plan to stay here for a long time. His mission is to destroy this transformation instrument that is trying to destroy New York, and the rest of the miscellaneous mutant affairs don't want to be mixed at all. Just as he lifted his feet, both Scott, who had been knocked down at the beginning, both started to slowly get up. Quicksilver gritted his teeth and ran towards Magneto. The bullet time that belonged to him started again, but now, he has long since lost it. Thinking of other ideas, I just want to take my father and escape as soon as possible. Damn. Scott scolded softly, his hand touched the button that activated the laser, but with his eyes, how could he have detected Quicksilver's movement, and in a blink of an eye, Magneto disappeared. Let go of Professor. Scott set his sights on Wanda. Wanda, who was left on the field, seemed to treat him like air and ignored him at all, but after taking a deep look at Suchen with great fear, the red Qianli figure gradually faded and disappeared. Episode 32. Joel. The appearance of the twins Quicksilver and Wanda also completely took Magneto away. The whole New York crisis came to an end. There is always an explanation. The culprit, Magneto, managed to escape, but the Brotherhood members were almost wiped out. Definitely because this incident was not small, the focus from the White House and the government could not help but return to mutant. Definitely, this matter has nothing to do with Suchin. He should be busy with his own racial internal affairs now. It's time to go. Need me to accompany you? In the room, it was Diana's gentle voice. Suchin shook his head and declined. I'll go alone and wait for my good news. The two chatted for a while. Suchin's figure was like a straight sharp arrow, soaring into the sky and flying straight to the north of the earth. Arctic. The endless cold air filled the whole world, and the white snow covered people's eyes, but in this rustling sound, there was a rustling sound resounding in the sky. The vast white curtain was completely torn apart with a long opening, and a whistling black figure was suspended in the air. Suchin squinted his eyes, his black and white clear eyes showed a faint light. He was looking for the Kryptonian reconnaissance ship hidden under the ice. With perspective/vision, he could see anything hidden at a glance. But until now, a full half an hour has passed. After all, the ice field in the entire Arctic is really not small. Suchin sighed, a faint frost revealed, and a smile quietly appeared on his face. Finally found. At a place at the foot of an iceberg that was nearly 1,000 meters deep, a completely frozen black ship was found. The problem now is just that. A red light beam was ejected from Suchin's pupils. The scorching temperature has a super terrifying penetrating power, and the ice layer is like tofu, without any sign of blocking, constantly being drilled through. After a while, Suchin's tall and sturdy figure has quietly come to a metal door panel. The black metal steel layer is covered with a layer of light frost, and the big character S is written on the steel plate. It was the family crest that belonged to Joel, the symbol of the Clark family. This was originally a reconnaissance ship that Kryptonians visited Earth tens of thousands of years ago. It can also be said that Kryptonians knew about the existence of Earth and the benefits of the sun's mutation to Kryptonian cells a long time ago. However, there seems to be a secret here. The Joel family seems to choose to hide it. Suchin doesn't know the reason, but he knows that Joel's figure is inside. Click. The door opens. A rather clean air blows towards the face. Suchin's figure is walking on the slightly dark corridor, surrounded by materials full of lines, neat and beautiful, and full of a faint sense of technology. Compared to the escape pod on my own ship, it is simply a lot more spacious. Before long, he had come to a neat platform. Suddenly, with a click, a black water column seemed to rise on the ground, and it condensed into a stone column in an instant. There was a keyhole carved on it, which was obviously a control platform. Suchin raised his eyebrows and took off the key hanging around his neck. Down, according to Messiah, this is the key granted by the Supreme Council and has the highest authority. Just before he could officially put the key in, a pupa-like thing silently hovered behind him. A blue energy whip suddenly extended out from under the pupa, and the energy drawn in the air was so strong that it actually produced a terrifying whistling sound. Suchin frowned, and his right hand grabbed the flying rope. The blue light attached to the long rope seemed to harbor some kind of highly lethal energy, and his palm was scalded with blood. Su Chen was angry, his strength suddenly bulged, and with a hand, he just pulled the pupa floating behind him to his front, preventing it from moving again. Then reach out and press, and the key in your hand is officially placed into the keyhole on the control. In an instant, the restless thing in his arms suddenly calmed down, and a faint blue light suddenly appeared in the surrounding space. Su Chen let go of the thing in his arms, and still let it patrol here, and the wound in his hand has completely healed. Don't think about it, this pupa-like floating thing is the escort in the reconnaissance ship. The light suddenly staggered, and a holographic figure appeared in front of him. Su Chen narrowed his eyes and looked at the middle-aged man in a robe. Compared with the somewhat calm Su Chen, the figure in front of him looked even more surprised. Who are you? Does it feel surprising? Su Chen laughed. Well. Who are you? The words were full of anxiety. Joel, you must be very disappointed now. Su Chen laughed, he paced on the platform, his clear eyes looked at the surprised expression of the person in front of him with interest. You still know my name, Kryptonian? Joel was shocked, his eyes seemed to have some data beating, and he was scanning the information of the young man in front of him. You're really a Kryptonian. Well, impossible, how terrible your cell strength is. Joel was not just as simple as Clark's father during his lifetime, he was also a Kryptonian scientist, and naturally knew the boy's body in front of him. How powerful is simply incredible, even if it is General Zod, I am afraid that it is far less than this guy. Impossible, how could a Kryptonian be a person like you? According to your bone age, you are only a little over 16 years old, but you have already climbed to the top of a Kryptonian. What are you? Well, are you the savior secretly created by the Supreme Council? Joel had vaguely heard such a plan. It doesn't matter who I am, what matters is everything here, I will take it away. Su Chen said. Don't think about it. Joel angrily denounced that this Krypton reconnaissance ship was originally reserved for his son Clark, how could he allow an outsider to interfere? Whether you are the freak born from the plan, Kryptonians like you should be completely buried. Joel scolded angrily, you should never come here, although I am dead, but I still control the entire ship. As soon as the words fell, the guards who were patrolling just now floated back, this time there were as many as 5. Su Chen dismissed it, but smiled, you control? Are you sure? Well, delete this long-winded artificial intelligence for me. The image of Joel's body suddenly blurred, his body collapsed into a stream of data, and he was experiencing file deletion, which was not completely eradicated from the program. Impossible. Joel's struggling hiss came. Su Chen shook his head and remained silent. The truth was as the Messiah said. He now has the highest authority of the Supreme Council and can naturally take over any ship belonging to Krypton. Episode 33. Creation Library. Made. The hissing sound kept ringing. The holographic image belonging to Joel has been completely deleted, and any measures he left for this reconnaissance ship during his lifetime have also been turned upside down and completely deleted in the program. With the highest authority on Krypton, he killed an intelligent life in a blink of an eye. Su Chen ignored it and continued to walk inside the reconnaissance ship. The long corridor environment was not stained with dust due to the long passage of time, and it seemed to be very clean and tidy everywhere. In a blink of an eye, he came to a side-house space. There are nutrition tanks like freezers placed here. Su Chen touched it with his hand and felt a touch of coldness. Then he pushed it with his hand, and there was a dry corpse inside. Immediately afterwards, he pushed all the remaining nutrient tanks away, and 2 corpses that had lost nutritional supply and demand came into his sight. Don't think about it, this is the Kryptonian who visited the Earth with the reconnaissance ship, but they seem to have encountered some kind of accident and died completely. The passage of tens of thousands of years has kept their bodies extremely intact. Su Chen squinted his eyes, but looked at the only vacant nutrition tank. There was no corpse in the tank, it was empty. Interesting. This is like the plot of the movie Superman, Man of Steel. Only one of the 4 nutrient tanks is empty. According to the analysis of the Easter eggs, it seems that the Kryptonian who left is the legendary female Superman. If it really existed, she was tens of thousands of years ago. At that time, the Earth was still barren, and she may have already left the solar system. Su Chen didn't continue to speculate on these hard-to-find mysteries. After closing the nutrient tank, Su Chen came to the most important part of this trip to the Arctic. Creation Library. Su Chen at the moment is like being in an aquarium. What catches the eye is a large blue pool, white dream bubbles slowly rippling in the water, and a large piece of coral-like aquatic plants gently rippling in the water. There are mother discs hanging on the water plants, which are the mother machines that nurture life. One by one Kryptonians were born in this kind of pool water and hatched in the mother disk. This is the creation library, and it is also a large-scale incubator for so-called artificial genes. Su Chen's thoughts moved, and the central treasure book that has been stored in the space ring appeared from his palm. Under the blue light of the surrounding dream bubbles, the black skull in his hand couldn't help but burst into a bright golden light. With the incubation environment of the creation library and the central treasure book that records all Kryptonian genetic codes, everything can begin. Prior to this, Su Chen had already learned how to manipulate this central collection. After some manipulation, the central collection, the skull of the Kryptonian god, was slowly placed in the blue pool, all connected to a series of master discs. The aquatic plants, like a baby's umbilical cord, are attached to the central collection. So, now it's time to choose what type of Kryptonian to create. At this moment, Su Chen felt that he was a god and could create people who fit his imagination at will. Looking at the Kryptonian text that appeared on the console, Su Chen didn't feel the slightest bit of cumbersome and awkward words. Instead, he was able to learn directly without a teacher, showing what type of Kryptonian he wanted to create. Scientists, engineers, or artists, soldiers. Su Chen couldn't help feeling that the Kryptonians had superb control over genes. To create a person of what type of destiny and what kind of job in the future, only a piece of genetic code is needed. Handmade? Obedience, the housework ability is first class. Su Chen glanced at it, and he pressed OK for no reason. He raised his eyebrows, and he also wanted to know what this so-called top beauty woman would do. How? A series of bubbles suddenly sounded in the blue pool, and a mother plate suddenly bulged and raised a light, and a life was being nurtured and hatched in it. System prompt: it is detected that there is only one Kryptonian life left in the spacecraft, which will greatly speed up the hatching. Su Chen knew it in his heart, which meant that the birth of this life would not take long, or even grow into an adult soon, but the consequence of excessive acceleration was the loss of life. But when he pressed a mate again and was about to choose the Kryptonian who created other samples, a system voice prompted, "The nutrient solution is not enough, please make up the nutrient solution." Su Chen was stunned for a while, then shook his head and laughed. Not only did the nutrition tank lose its supply, but the creation library here also didn't have much energy? Does that mean that I guessed that I created two maids-like vases? In the original plan, he was preparing to create hundreds of all kinds of Kryptonian life in one breath, but obviously, the reality is very skinny. But it doesn't matter anymore, Su Chen sighed, and then he couldn't help laughing. With these two women of pure Krypton blood, wouldn't it be possible to create a villain? There is still hope for the revival of Krypton. Su Chen laughed self-deprecatingly, but in his heart he made up his mind to go to interstellar space and look for the outpost left by Krypton. Looking at the two little beings quietly hatching in the dreamy blue water, Su Chen also knew that his trip was not in vain. Okay, it's time to go back. The entire Krypton reconnaissance ship was empty, and there was nothing he needed to look for, and the reconnaissance ship never thought about moving. When he came to the center of the ship, Su Chen took out his key and put it on his neck so dearly that the light around him dimmed instantly. Before closing the door, he also knew that when the reconnaissance ship suddenly started, the signal has been sent and has begun to be captured by General Zod light years away, deep in space. Presumably, the arrival of General Zod is just around the corner. That is also a rare surviving Kryptonian, a powerful opponent. Will he obey himself? This is an unknown answer. After all, as a general, he still betrayed the Supreme Council, which symbolizes power, for the future of Krypton, but what Su Chen knows is that if this guy refuses to accept it, he will fight until he does. This kind of 2-5 is the most annoying. Bang! The door of the reconnaissance ship was completely closed, and at the same time, Su Chen stepped on his toes, and his figure flew into the air. Episode 34. My power can do whatever it wants. Within the ghost domain. This is a place of exile in the depths of space, an interstellar border full of chaos, ignorance, desolate and dead, and no life will appear here. General Zod, who was exiled here by Krypton, has been in exile for many years. He is unfortunate and lucky, and because of this exile, the collapse of Krypton did not affect him. He survived, and at the same time, the idea of revival of Krypton has not stopped in his heart. He has been drifting in the interstellar space for such a long time. Based on his own memory, he has been collecting the required resources in the outpost abandoned by Krypton. Zod is completely alive, he is not reconciled, he wants to revive Krypton. General, an unknown signal came from the depths of space, absolutely right, this is the signal of our Krypton spacecraft. An unexpected news came quietly. Signal? Zod was a little excited. Yes, after signal analysis, it is the signal from the reconnaissance ship that probed the interstellar space tens of thousands of years ago. This means that in addition to us, there are compatriots on Krypton who are alive. Zod was very sure, but then he laughed. It turned out to be a reconnaissance ship, then they must have the existence of the creation library. Have you found the source of the signal? Well, a blue star called Earth. Very good, I believe there will be surprises. The fleet is moving at full speed. Zod in the deep space must have received a signal, but it is still unknown when it will come to Earth. After all, space travel is very time-consuming, maybe a few days, maybe a few years, no one can get it right. Now, Suchin quietly waits for the fleet led by Zod to come to Earth, and has searched for a large number of Zod fleet with a lot of Kryptonian energy. Once it is occupied by himself, the creation vault will constantly produce Kryptonian people. But what to do with the Kryptonians produced? Suchin also had no idea. He knew that the fleet to which General Zod belonged could modify the atmospheric environment of the star so that it could adapt to the physique of the Kryptonians. Otherwise, it would probably take several years to adapt to the Earth. I need a piece of land, or do I need a planet? After thinking about it for a long time, Suchin couldn't help but wonder if he could transform the Moon and Mars around the Earth. But these are all blind men and elephants, and there is no spectrum. After waiting for about a month, Suchin on the sofa pressed the remote control and was bored watching the TV program, but there was no arrogant voice in the TV program to hack all the radio stations, and loudly announced that they were about to invade the Earth. It's too slow. In this way, half a month passed. Suchin did not wait for Zod's Kryptonian fleet, but waited for a thing that came from the sky to visit the Earth. New Mexico. In front of him was a slightly barren desert landscape. A gust of wind blew past, and sand and dust swept across the entire world. With a whistling sound in the air, a figure slowly landed on the land. Looking at the town not far away, Suchin, who felt a little hungry, walked forward. Click. Pushing open the small door, Suchin came to a hamburger shop. Outside the mottled glass windows, there were off-road vehicles running across the road. Of tourists, and even the entire store is full of people. Boss, your outfit is quite cool. What kind of movie are you making? A clerk said enthusiastically. Suchin looked down at his Superman suit and couldn't help shaking his head and laughing. It turned out that he forgot to change it, but the other party seemed to have misunderstood that he was a film worker, so he couldn't help but say, I'm filming Thor 1, just a small role. Thor 1? Which movie is this? However, the clerk did not dismantle the table. After all, the visitor was a guest, and he could not help but hand over a freshly baked hamburger and put it on Suchin's table. Suchin ate it, and while he was oblivious, the black suit on his body rolled and turned into a bracelet. A drunken man who witnessed the situation couldn't help but wipe his eyes, thinking that he was completely drunk. Finished? Seeing that the tall and strong figure finished eating the hamburger, the clerk couldn't help but try his best to promote the food in his store. Suchin just shook his hand and said with a smile, enough is enough, I have to continue filming. It's my turn in the next scene. It's a play that pulls a hammer, and it's very important. Okay, welcome to come. The clerk said very politely, but looking at the figure in front of him, he always felt surprised again and again. By the way, the original black uniform was missing, but he was also puzzled. Is he going to pull the hammer? What's interesting is that the hammer is something that suddenly fell from the sky in this small town. The strange thing is that no one can pull this cool hammer. Just like this strange thing spreads 10 times. 10 rumors, but it made many people come here, so that the desert town is full of people. Definitely, this strange phenomenon not only attracts tourists from the outside world, but the abnormal energy readings produced at the time of the fall have already been completely captured by an organization called SHIELD. Several agents were in ambush and waited for the arrival of their follow-up troops to completely drive away these idle people and block the place. At this time, a tall and strong figure came into their eyes, and the agents frowned. Not only was this person particularly prominent, but this guy jumped in the queue and came to the hammer. Let me go. Suchin pushed away the guy in front of him who was trying to lift the hammer. The bearded man was furious, turned around and was about to lose his temper, but the man in front of him was really tall, and the shadow cast by the shadow completely covered his body. Up. Suchin didn't care, but raised his eyebrows when he saw Mjolnir in front of him. I look forward to the stars and the moon, but I still look forward to the aliens, but it is such an artifact. Suchen laughed, but he was also very interested in this Mjolnir that no one could lift. Some people say that Mjolnir is a test of human nature, and only the best can be lifted, but the captain can only move half a point. Some people say that it takes strength, but the unparalleled Hulk can't shake half a point. A more reliable statement is that it requires the approval of Odin magic. Suchen didn't care, he would tell everyone, my power really does whatever I want. He didn't even bother to roll up his sleeves, crouched down slightly, and then stretched out his right hand to hold it. One couldn't breathe, and the whole untouched, motionless Mjolnir was pulled up by him. Episode 35. Thor. Mjolnir was as light as nothing, so he was gently supported by Suchen's hand. The crowd who heard the wind couldn't help but stare blankly, especially the guys who couldn't shake them after repeated attempts just now. They were even more stunned. This guy's strength is still an ordinary person? Damn, this hammer was actually taken away. The expressions of the agents of SHIELD changed greatly, and they glanced at each other in dismay. Seeing that sturdy figure continued to walk towards the town, they had no choice but to follow. Inside the burger shop. It's you again, the movie is over. Inside the burger shop, the clerk who wiped sweat with a towel couldn't help but smile. Well, after thinking about it, the signs you introduced to me are all okay. I just came back after finishing my work. Suchen spread his hands and smiled. Seeing that the clerk looked at the stuff in his hand in surprise, he smiled, it's just a prop for filming. After speaking, he threw it casually and smashed it to the ground. Unexpectedly, at this time, a figure lying on the table just now stood up, looked at the hammer on the ground with a blank face, and trembled in disbelief. Mjolnir. Mjolnir is the official name of Mjolnir. The person who spoke was Thor himself. He was not only expelled from the Asgard domain by Odin, but his whole person was even reclaimed from the divine power. At the moment, he was undoubtedly just a mortal, and he couldn't even shake his own hammer. He blushed, and the bulging muscles in his hands were covered with blue veins, but that was the case. He couldn't lift the hammer for half a minute. Damn, it's impossible. Thor roared loudly. At the moment he tasted despair for the first time. He lost his father's favor and couldn't even use Mjolnir. The combination of grief and anger actually caused the famous son of Odin to slump to the ground. The heart-piercing voice was exactly what I felt, which not only attracted the attention of the audience, but also the companions around Thor couldn't help but read it. Come over. What's the matter with you? A group of astronomers who were very destined to become attached to Thor looked at the heartbroken guy in front of him and didn't know how to persuade him, so he could only comfortably pat him on the back quietly. After a while, Thor seemed to remember something, then looked at Suchen in shock and said, You brought it here? You can afford Mjolnir, no. It's absolutely impossible, even if it is my brother can't do it. Suchen raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, What's wrong with this? No, how could you be immortal? Before he could speak, Suchen gently picked up the hammer on the ground. His hands and feet didn't struggle at all, and the objects in his hands seemed to be extremely light. Mortal? Suchen weighed the Mjolnir in his hand, and even threw it up a short distance before picking it up steadily. This. Thor's face was dead, and he couldn't imagine looking at the scene in front of him. The inheritance belonging to the Odin blood was controlled by an outsider. You say it's yours, then take it and try it. After speaking, he threw the Mjolnir in his hand to him. Thor didn't dare to pick it up with his hands at all, and even was so frightened that he hurried back several steps, lest the hammer would hurt him. At this moment, the hammer that was thrown out was about to land, but Suchen was extremely quick again. Took it in one hand. Didn't you say it's yours? Why are you acting like a timid mortal now? Suchen teased him. Thor's face was ugly, knowing that this was his original words just now, but he didn't expect to be hit by someone instead. Only. Having lost control, he can't use it, but how can he easily pick up Mjolnir? That's an Odin thing. It was the invincible artifact that the sons of Odin used when they fought in the Dominion. Thinking of this, his heart was even more unwilling. It's impossible, who are you? Thor's eyes widened, and he questioned with anger. His body was not as good as taking several steps forward. The bulging muscles were as terrifying as a bulge, and he seemed to be ready to fight without saying a word. Suchen glanced at him disdainfully and said with a smile, After losing strength, the whole person has become an idiot? You don't know how dangerous your provocative behavior is now? Thor, who had fallen into madness, was stunned by such a look, and suddenly woke up like a dream. The blood flowing in the whole body cooled instantly, and a cold air suddenly rose from the spine. It was a sudden danger signal from the body, which warned him to wave. Horrible effect possible when arm. Thor was shocked and took 2 small steps back tremblingly. Who are you? This time his tone finally calmed down, with helplessness written in it. The astronomers around them couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. They were confused about hammers and Thor, but they knew that the tall and sturdy figure in front of them was obviously not a good person to make this arrogant Thor submit. Stubble. Suchin just smiled and didn't declare his identity. Although he didn't observe the surrounding environment all the time, he knew that there were even several sneaky figures lurking around. With the cautious demeanor of every word and every move, it is easy to see that he is well trained, and the slightly bulging thing around his waist must be a weapon like a gun. He didn't think much about it. He knew that this must be Shield from Winfeng. After all, that's how the movie plays, right? Suchin laughed inwardly. Suddenly, the wind suddenly picked up outside, and the sand and dust slapped the glass. Suchin noticed the movement outside, and couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He felt the movement in the air just now, and knew that it was the energy fluctuation from Bifrost, and that another person fell from the Asgard domain to the mortal world one after another. Whoosh! A red light flashed completely. The corner of the house where it was located was completely cut off by this fiery beam, and there was a dull sound from the outside, which was the sound of a monster walking on the ground. Damn, it's the destroyer. Thor wondered why the killer who was responsible for guarding Asgard in the domain of the gods would come here. Is this to execute him? Thinking of this, Thor's expression became even more difficult to look at. Suchin smiled and urged him to say, "Didn't you see that guy outside? Go and stop him from slaughtering the humans in the town. Your fearlessness and bravery are the key to regaining your power." Thor was stunned on the spot, bewildered. Suchin patted his head, thinking that he is a spoiler now? Anyway, that's what happened. Come on kid, your friends are still fighting outside. By the way, if you really can't stand it, please wait until I finish eating this hamburger now. Episode 36. Shield. Boom. The earth seemed to tremble, and people's visions immediately followed. It was a violent effect when a 4-meter-high steel-armored robot walked around. From time to time, this robot with a very smooth shape actually sprayed out red pillars of fire. Whoosh! With a bang, a red beam of light that almost spanned the sky and the earth swept across the town, and the passing human body was completely cut off, while the concrete stone pillars and the buildings that were swept away were completely swept away. Was cut off in the middle. The fierce steel-armored people are raging in this desert town like this. Due to the very large flow of people in the past, they are not immune to extinction. Not only do they have to avoid the flashing red light beam in front of them, but the beam is accompanied by the fiery attributes of the building also completely ignited many buildings. The fire lit up the town in an instant, and the scorching temperature even caused many plants to ignite directly. Bang! After a muffled sound, a strong man in a fur coat flew out. Wolfsta! Thor yelled. It was one of the 4 warriors of Asgard, both a subordinate to the son of Odin and a partner worthy of his back. This time they came from Asgard to protect Thor, the unarmed son of Odin, from any harm. Why did the destroyer attack us? Could it be? Thor was puzzled. No. It's your younger brother Loki, he activated this killer just to kill you. Sif, who was also one of the 4 warriors, gritted his teeth. When Thor listened to Sif's words, he couldn't help feeling dizzy. Is his brother actually going to kill him? Why? But looking at several battlefield comrades who were retreating, he felt indignant and deeply felt that he was powerless. Thinking of this, he couldn't help thinking of the words that the strange young man told him, being brave and fearless is the key to awakening his ability. Perhaps because of his intentional interests, Thor was never able to break out his own divine power, and instead was embarrassed by the attacking destroyer. Boom! A small mushroom cloud exploded in the flat ground, and half of the building was destroyed. A terrifying heat wave swept the audience, and the destroyer continued to walk forward. Su Chen in the restaurant had just eaten his fill and burped slightly. Looking at the damage caused by the destroyer outside, he couldn't help but smack his tongue. Sure enough, this destroyer is much stronger than the one he knew in the movie. Sure enough, it was still limited by the special effects and funding of the movie, so I felt that the destroyer was average. Suchin shook his head and laughed. But it's no wonder that the destroyer is a super large killer created by Odin and the gods of the earth. Each god sang the most beautiful blessings for it, in order to drive away the members of the god group who came to the earth. Therefore, the destroyer is much stronger than the gods in a sense. Even if time has passed and he has experienced various battles of large and small file size, the power of the destroyer is still very impressive, otherwise he would not be responsible for guarding Odin's Asgard treasure vault. You and the monster outside come from the same place? At this moment, a figure came to the front angrily and asked. Phil Coulson? You know me. Phil Coulson's agent flashed a hint of surprise, and then calmly said after a while, damn, you know how much trouble this has brought to our planet, and what the weakness of that machine is. Suchin spread his hands and said, sorry, I asked the wrong person, you should ask the resisting people outside. Phil Coulson looked a little ugly, but at this time news came from the headset. It was news from SHIELD. He couldn't help but bury his head and said, the whole town has been blocked, okay, the headquarters mothership is here, and they are here too? Very good. Then this will finally destroy it. With super listening, Suchin was able to know the content of their conversation. He wanted to stand up and sat down again, sipping a beer. If that's the case, then I'll see your performance. After Phil Coulson's surprised eyes, Suchin's eyes were already looking up to the high sky in the distance. His eyes penetrated the ceiling in front of him, and he also saw through the white clouds in the thousands of miles of sky, hiding them using some kind of invisible device. The aircraft carrier immediately came into his sight. That is the aircraft carrier of S.H.I.E.L.D. For incomparably huge turbine engines sprayed out vast power, and with the anti-gravity technology, the entire mothership like an island flew into the air. There was a burst of light, and an SHIELD standard Harrier fighter flew out of the mothership and flew towards the destroyer in the town. The fighter jets jetted out blue light to form firepower, intertwined with the destroyer under the nose. At the same time, three figures jumped out directly. The destroyer's mask flickered with red light, and the high-temperature beam was about to be ejected, but two arrows for no reason pierced through his mask, and the explosive hidden in the arrowhead exploded with a bang, causing the destroyer's mask to explode. Halfway through. One guy was even quicker with his eyes and hands. He raised his shield in the air and slashed it directly. He didn't know what material the shield was made of, but he actually pierced the destroyer's mask directly. The remaining figure of a lady who landed on the ground raised her hand and two darts flew out, and it exploded again at the hole in the destroyer's mask. In just a moment, under the surprise, the three of them cooperated seamlessly, smashing the head of the mighty destroyer just now. This behavior still surprised the Asgard warriors, but Thor shouted loudly, "Run!" I saw that the destroyer didn't look like a battle armor robot at all. Its head healed in an instant, the wound just caused was gone, and a terrifying red light flashed under the mask. Whoosh! The red light came in an instant. Steve's face was startled. He hurriedly used his shield to block it, but the terrifying majestic power still threw his body nearly 100 meters away and smashed into a house. Hawkeye and Black Widow, who were twisting their bows, were also anxious in their hearts. The destroyer's eyes were locked on them, and bursts of red light were brewing under the mask. But at this moment, there was another roar in the air. Whoosh! The miniature missiles fell into the air like raindrops, and they exploded on the destroyer's body one after another. A gorgeous golden and red armor was suspended in the air, and it was Iron Man Tony, who was half a step behind. Looks like I'm not too late, it's my show? Tony's condescending voice came. But red light flashed through the thick smoke underneath, different from the thick beam of light just now. I saw a red beam of light penetrated the sky, instantly hitting the golden red armor that was staying in the air. Iron Man seemed to be disconnected. Kites generally fall toward the ground. The destroyer was thoroughly enraged. Episode 37. Face the destroyer. Human ants are really annoying. The successive artillery attacks completely annoyed Loki, who was manipulating the destroyer behind the scenes. Sitting on the throne of Asgard, Loki supported his chin, his face was extremely cold, and his brows were slightly wrinkled. Even if he was in Asgard, he could detect all the movements of the earth, so he deeply realized how lethal the mortals who resisted. He was annoyed. Boom! Loki tapped the Spear of Eternity in his hand, the key to the destroyer. The destroyer liberates me from ability, kills it completely, and must take down Thor. The gloomy words reverberated in the Asgard palace, but the Odin, who was praised by the epic, was awake, seemingly unaware of what was going on outside. Small town in New Mexico. Under the smog in the sky, the destroyer was completely activated to its potential performance, even if it was not as good as before, but when ability was fully activated, it was not that simple. Not only was the furnace under the mask spewing flames, but even the palms of his hands seemed to have opened small gates, and the inaudible red light kept flying in, knocking Iron Man Tony down quickly. Seemingly recalling the annoying sound of machine guns just now, the destroyer raised his head slightly, and the furnace under the mask evaporated terrifying white smoke. Then, with a bang, a red beam of light supported the heaven and earth into everyone's eyes. What seemed to be a blue and white cloud was swept away by this red beam of light, and a large explosion of smoke was swept away. It turned out to be an invisible Harrier-shaped fighter jet that was directly blown up by the destroyer. Damn. Phil Coulson cursed, praying silently for his colleagues. Iron Man Tony, who was knocked down to the ground, coughed a few times, and barely stood up with the support of others. It's you, a handsome fitness man in uniform. I heard that you are very familiar with my father. The one who pulled him up was the United States Captain Steve, who had just been unsealed from the ice but had already discovered that the entire planet was becoming more dangerous. Can you still move? Steve ignored Tony's complaints and said with a very serious face. Tony nodded and said, I don't have much energy, so I can continue to attack. But according to me, this guy is almost indestructible, and he is still recovering and healing. How can we destroy it? I think we should hand over these problems to those aliens. They provoked it, right? Tony said helplessly. Under the scan of his intelligent housekeeper JRVIS, he found that the destroyer in front of him had no weaknesses at all, and the unknown metal element left him at a loss. But Phil Coulson showed a wry smile. The 4 Asgard warriors who landed on the Earth were beaten with wounds all over their bodies, and they were obviously not the opponents of the destroyer. Okay, you've had enough. A slightly cynical voice sounded. Tony's expression changed suddenly, and he looked at this tall and strong figure in surprise. Isn't this a super ability person who had a relationship in the desert? It's you. Tony said. Why are you here? Are you an alien over there too? Suchin shook his head and laughed, and said, you should be glad I'm not. After he finished speaking, he didn't look back, and the wind swept across the flat ground, and his figure had already flew out. But at this moment, Mjolnir, who had been abandoned, suddenly burst into a blue light, but it was Thor who finally broke through the shackles set by Odin when the Asgard warrior was dying, and he was fearless. At this moment, he finally felt the constant divine power in his body, and the electric lights splashed out of his body, and the sky above the sky even bloomed with thunderous clouds. Hammer. Mjolnir finally responded to his call, and a handful flew directly from the burger shop into his palm. At this moment, he is omnipotent, vowing to destroy the destroyer. But it was also at this moment that there was a loud whistling sound of blasting in the flat ground, and the originally rampant destroyer was hit by a heavy punch from a sturdy figure. The indestructible steel plate armor sank straight away. Suchin, who was suspended in the air, was silent, and with another fist, he smashed the destroyer in front of him again. Boom! The metal plate armor that was crumbling suddenly burst open, but the destroyer armor has a cavity inside, like a furnace containing terrifying flames. The fiery fireworks also sprayed out from the cracks in the body in an instant, and the temperature almost on the surface of the sun evaporated the terrifying white smoke, which completely blurred all the vision around. In the face of this swept anger, Suchin was calm, his waist and abdomen contracted slightly, something was brewing in his throat, and when he opened his mouth, a cold and frosty air poured out of his mouth. Exhale into frost. This frost not only extinguished the high-temperature flames that swept in, but even the destroyer in the deep pit below had frozen most of his body. The legs were completely frozen, sticking to the ground, and the cracked large hole could not be healed because of the freezing. The furnace inside the destroyer was blown by this frosty air, and it was only bleak and only left. There was a small flame. The monster that nearly destroyed the entire town, shot down high-altitude flying objects, and tortured all the heroes to death, was so easily defeated? Ended. Suchin sighed, and swept out with one leg. The frozen steel armor lost all activity, and with a bang, the entire destroyer was swept away by the middle, seemingly destroying some kind of magic circle, and the shaky flames in the furnace were instantly extinguished. It's still a defective product after all. Suchin shook his head. Although this destroyer was much stronger than he had imagined, it was still too low quality after 2 punches. The gods are still much stronger than this thing. This is the end? Thor was stunned on the spot. His fighting spirit was high just after the recovery of his divine power, but he didn't expect he would be gone before he made a move. Looking at the Mjolnir in his hand, Suchin smiled and said, "Congratulations, then this thing will be given to you." "Damn, that was originally my weapon," Thor said with a stern expression, thinking of the conflict between the two just now, he can't wait to fight this guy now. More angry than Thor, but Loki. Witnessing the whole process, Loki's face was shocked, and he was paralyzed on the throne. Blue veins appeared in his right hand, holding the Spear of Eternity tightly. Obviously, he was very angry. Damn, how can a small Earth have such terrifying people? P.S. I have studied the current new book recommendations. It seems that the list is changed between Monday and Friday. It is estimated that I will not be able to get the recommendation on Monday. It may depend on Friday, so I may need to control the number of words now, but there are still 3 guaranteed updates every day. Let's break out again. Episode 38. Undercurrent surging. The mighty destroyer was completely destroyed. Sitting on the throne of Asgard and commanding from afar, Loki's face was ashen. He never imagined that such a terrifying character could exist in a barren and backward place, but what worried him even more was that Thor was about to lead the 4 warriors back to Asgard. No matter how much power he craved, Loki knew that without the destroyer, his throne would be lost. Damn ants, messing with my plan. Loki said sternly, taking the hatred to heart. Sure enough, Thor did not stay in New Mexico for long, but was so worried that he was ready to rush back to Asgard. Before leaving, he solemnly bid farewell to Jane, a female astronomical scientist he knew on Earth. A rainbow beam of light broke through the air, and Thor and the 4 Asgard warriors disappeared in front of everyone. Really, everything is true, aliens do exist and are so close to us, Phil Coulson murmured. I can correct it for you, the Asgard people, and USHIELD who stole our research results, can you return them to us? Jane Foster, a female astronomical scientist, said in a forceful tone. Since these astronomers just hit the Asgard, the research materials in their hands were inevitably confiscated by the S.H.I.E.L.D. Phil Coulson laughed softly and said with great relief, definitely give you back, S.H.I.E.L.D. Even offer you a job. Whether it's the research knowledge of these astronomers or the little girl's relationship with Thor, SHIELD can still fully understand them. Phil Coulson couldn't help thinking of that terrifying young man. If he could be recruited, even if he knew him. Thinking of this, Phil Coulson couldn't help looking at Iron Man Tony and said, you know that guy? He looks from our side, not some alien. Asgard. Jane Foster reminded sullenly. Yeah, he doesn't look like one of the Asgards. Phil Coulson laughed. Seeing this, Tony just spread his hands and said helplessly, I just met him once, and he helped me a little bit, but I'm not familiar with him, and I don't even know his origins. Under the subtext, you don't need to ask me. What about that guy? Long gone. To be precise, it flew away. A month and a half later, I didn't expect that Suchin himself just waited for a Mjolnir who fell to the world, and Thor and his party, and then there must be another fight between their brothers in Asgard. Next, Loki escaped from Asgard and accidentally met Thanos, the son of the Titans. And then waited for the Chitauri army? Suchin couldn't help but complain. After thinking about it, the arrival of the Zod fleet is still natural, and he no longer has to worry about it. Anyway, he should know the moment it arrives. In Manhattan, New York, a high-rise building more than 300 meters high, at the top, is the penthouse where Sue Chen and Diana lived. Diana, who was wearing a long red dress with suspenders, revealed a flawless and delicate collarbone. She smiled eloquently, is there any gain? No. Suchin shook his head and hugged the 2 little orange cats in the house in his arms. Don't worry, it will come sooner or later. Diana smiled. By the way, Katie came to see you in the morning, and she left after playing here for a while when you weren't there. Okay. Suchin nodded and replied. The days returned to the plain and warm life, and from time to time, I went out to the city with Diana or the little girl Katie. Definitely, a lot has happened during this time. Iron Man Tony has been busy with his company's internal affairs after Thor's incident, and the Stark Expo has also been put on the plan. Definitely, Tony's life is not comfortable these days. Because of the iron pieces of arc reactor adsorbent in his heart due to the relationship, he could not help suffering from palladium poisoning, and the whole person became very sluggish and perverse. Steve, the captain of the United States, is also busy adjusting to the rhythm of the new era, and he is still confused by the high technology of mobile phones and computers. Hawkeye, an agent of SHIELD, also went on various assignments with this World War II hero from time to fight terrorist criminals one by one. Definitely they have an old partner who is Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, and these 3 are the prototype of a heroic organization Avengers in the eyes of S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury. Iron Man Tony also tried his best to win over the crisis of palladium poisoning on and Natasha Romanoff, who disappeared during this time, was assigned another mysterious mission, which was to go to a place in the Middle East to invite Dr. Banner back. The so-called Dr. Banner is the legendary Hulk who used Brooklyn, New York as a playground. Feeling the appearance of the Asgard and the terrifying power of a mysterious young man, director Nick Fury is pushing the Avengers plan at full speed, and a plan for a high-tech energy weapon has also been put on the agenda by him. That is based on the Tesseract, which is the space gem, to extract the free energy of the gems and create epoch-making weapons with high lethality. Definitely, Nick Fury himself didn't know how much trouble he would cause by secretly using the space gem. Fortunately, the Asgard's visit to Earth did not cause any major social fishing reels, and all news was controlled under the control of the SHIELD agency. However, it is the mutant incident that has caused huge amounts of fishing boats in the society today. The last time Magneto attacked New York's Grand Central Station was enough to eat a pot. Who would have thought that there would be a major incident recently? It's unbelievable that the president was assassinated by mutant, and he was assassinated in the White House. Fortunately, the president himself was just frightened. Major media reported that mutant was once again attracted attention. The mutant registration bill, military control, and other very inhumane agendas are all being discussed in the White House. Mutant's position suddenly became awkward. The X-Men headed by Charles is thinking about how to find out the murderer, while Magneto on the other side is thinking about how to make a profit under this dark tide. But no matter what, the fact is that General Stryker has been promoted by the president, and Stryker, as an extreme opposition who hates mutant, has been favored and reused. This signal undoubtedly sends an important message to the outside world that mutant is about to be executed. This time it became dark and turbulent, and mutant's situation became precarious. Episode 39. Blue Devil. The mutant incident made the city all over the place. Su Chen looked indifferent. The next morning, Shadowcat Katie knocked on the door early. Dong dong. Su Chen opened her sullen eyes and walked over in slippers, but before the door opened, a slender figure penetrated directly from the door. It was the sweet and lovely little Katie. She showed a pure smile and said, "Where's Sister Diana? Still sleeping in the room? What about today? Take you to catch someone? Ah. Arresting someone?" Su Chen was a little puzzled, and he really didn't understand what kind of guy was bothering him himself. "Come on, don't talk about it, that guy runs very fast, and Teacher Chin is there." Katie hugged Su Chen's arm and dragged him out to run. Every wall seemed to be like air. It kept going through it. This is Shadowcat Katie's mutant ability, a molecular mimicry that traverses and merges into various objects, sees walls as air, and shares this penetrating ability with those who touch her body. But after a while, Jean Goulet's moving and beautiful figure came into view, still wearing that long red dress, which looked very dignified and beautiful. The three of them didn't chat for a long time, and flew to a church in Brazil in a Blackbird fighter jet. Only then did Su Chen realize who he was going to arrest. A mutant? A mutant who tried to murder the president? That's right, this guy runs very fast. Katie said sweetly, "Professors who wear a brainwave strengthening device have a hard time capturing his tracks, because the speed of his transfer is too fast. It's like a rocket, no. There is a fault in the path. It is not moving at the speed of light, but moving in space like a jump, so it is difficult for us to locate the exact position." Qin Gri added. Su Chen is now aware of it. The guy who assassinated the president is undoubtedly the Blue Devil who can move through space. His whereabouts are very strange. If Quicksilver's action path is a linear path, then the Blue Devil moves point to point in space. It is indeed very difficult to catch such a mutant, not to mention that you can always lock his position, but the moment he is alerted, the uncappable path of action directly makes people lose their target. Thinking about it, this is indeed a challenge. Su Chen smiled and said, "I also want to find a chance to compare the speed with Quicksilver. Now it's not bad to play with the Blue Devil who travels through this space." Brazil, a church, where Blackbird fighter jets soon descended. The surrounding town is sparsely populated and deserted, but there are few people. The entire church is completely deserted. The statue of Jesus in the center is full of conspicuous spider webs, and even the ceiling has collapsed in half. Obviously, no one has stayed here for a long time. Jean Goulet was slightly lingering at the door of the church. She frowned slightly, and said softly, "It's here, this guy." Under the perception of mind fluctuations, one of the figures lying on the beam and screaming was firmly locked. Su Chen nodded and pushed open the church door without hesitation. With a click, a burst of thick dust slowly spread out. In contrast, the light from the outside sun also officially poured into the church. Jean Galay's face was anxious for a while, and she whispered, "This will alarm the people inside. You don't need to do it many times." Suchin shook his hand. He was not here to attack, but to prove his speed. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on his face, and he said in a buoyant voice, "The people inside pay attention, you are already surrounded by me, just tie your hands." The blue devil in the church had already opened his eyes. The moment the door was opened, his innate perception made him instantly vigilant. At the moment, he heard an extremely arrogant remark, and he couldn't help but cursed in his heart. How many people dare to surround me? But all of a sudden, the hair on his body stretched upright, and he sensed a dangerous smell lingering all over his body. It was a soul-capable person. Immediately, he stood up directly, not daring to stay here for a while. His toes stepped on the beam, his body flung into the sky, and with a bang, his figure turned into blue smoke and dissipated. I lost his goal. Jean Galay frowned, and under the perception of her mental fluctuations, the figure who was staying in the church completely disappeared. It's okay, I'll go after him. Suchin finished speaking with a smile, but his body remained motionless. His ears seemed to flow from the surrounding wind, constantly capturing the blue devil's whereabouts. In a small forest several kilometers away, he finally found his trail. There he is. I'll take a step first and wait for me to come back. Suchin fell, and his figure flew out like a sharp arrow. Bang! In a split second, there was a crashing sound in the forest, and the birds flew out of the forest when they were startled. Blue Devil felt the coldness swept across his back. He was startled, and his whole figure turned into a cloud of smoke again. It disappeared from its place again. Suchin grabbed the air and just held a cloud of smoke. Interesting. But where can you run to? Under the superhearing, the sound of all things poured into his mind, and within a few seconds, he had already determined the whereabouts of the Blue Devil. The Blue Devil, who was crouching on the top of the building, just wanted to rest for a while, was suddenly startled again. The figure quickly filled the entire eyeball from far to near. Damn. Bang. The entire building was directly knocked down by the flying figure. The Blue Devil only felt that he was hit by a full-speed train, his body was all dislocated, and he just wanted to get out of here quickly. However, before he had time to travel through the space, one hand had firmly grasped his neck and lifted his body upside down. It seems that you're just like that. Suchin shook his head. The Blue Devil's space shuttle is really cool, but unfortunately there seems to be some kind of vision restriction, which makes him travel a distance that doesn't seem to be far. A level of exaggeration. It seems that if you have time, you will still have to find Quicksilver to play. However, if the Flash exists, it will be even better. Okay, don't move. Suchin said halfway through, and after all, he was too lazy to coax a child and continued to persuade him. He punched him directly and knocked him out. Episode 40. Fantastic Four. With rough blue fur, sharp claws on both feet and hands, and sharp-eared monkey cheeks, this is the image of the Blue Devil or Nightcrawler in front of him. Just this guy, who is the target of assassinating the president? Katie said, standing behind Suchin with a bit of disgust. It's him. Jean Goulet nodded. The next step is to interrogate who is behind the scenes. Interrogation? Naturally, it is not a simple criminal interrogation, but the memory of Charles, who can be said to be the master of the mind, is wiped from his mind. Naturally, Nightcrawler has no secrets at all. It only lasted for a few minutes, and Jean Goulet was already aware of some secrets. It's Stryker. As soon as Jean finished speaking, Katie looked at Suchin beside her with starry eyes, and said admiringly, "It's exactly as you guessed." Suchin shook his head and smiled. The little girl was just a liar. Even if she didn't know the plot development in advance, even if she guessed the motive behind the murder, it was easy to point to General Stryker. Jean Goulet ignored the flirting of the two and said calmly, "Stryker controlled Nightcrawler through an unknown psychedelic drug, so he is also an innocent object. In other words, if the drug is left unchecked, more mutants may become Stryker's puppets." So. Katie's eyes were expectant, and there was a lot of fighting in it. So. We must control the source of the drug and completely destroy Stryker's base. Jean Goulet said with firm determination. In the face of the two ladies who were full of fighting spirit, Suchin spread his hands indifferently and faced the military conflict. For him, it was undoubtedly a fitness exercise after dinner. At this moment, Suchin raised his eyebrows and said suddenly, "Someone is coming." High in the sky, another flight fighter broke through the clouds and slowly landed towards the ground. The smooth lines of the fuselage and the tightened waist were full of the flavor of future technology. This was obviously not an ordinary military fighter. A burly man with a sturdy mountain and his body covered with blocks, as well as a slightly thin figure, walked down with a young and beautiful lady. "It's you." Gulay was stunned, her vigilance slightly relaxed. "Fantastic Four?" Katie seemed a little uncertain. After all, there were only 3 people in front of her, but at this moment, a flaming figure whistled in mid-air, falling to the ground like a shooting star in the blink of an eye, and her body was surging. The fireworks instantly converged and dissipated. "Hey, you guys are flying too fast, don't wait for me." Johnny the Burning Man accused his partner. Obviously, the person in front of him is the legendary Fantastic Four. Suchin squinted his eyes. Although the Fantastic Four are Marvel heroes, they are completely separated from the Marvel movie universe because of the copyright. However, in this world, the Fantastic Four are perfectly integrated into it, and they are also he became famous early on for several years. Came here this time, but did not know why? But obviously it was for the Nightcrawler lying on the ground in front of him. Sure enough, Mr. Fantastic Reed, who was headed by him, stood up directly and said, "I'm sorry, we must have the same goal as you." Gulay looked at the Nightcrawler on the side and said with a frown, "Nightcrawler belongs to mutant, this is our mutant's business." Katie asked in confusion, "Isn't the Fantastic Four a mutant?" "That's definitely, we are the product of the mutation of solar radiation, and you are the product of the X gene. So we are not the same." Johnny's voice came. Reed looked at Johnny for a while, motioning him to shut up, and then he said sincerely, "He is indeed a mutant, but after the attempted assassination of the president, it is no longer just a mutant's internal affairs." It seemed that Suchin was the backbone of the 3 people in front of him, and Reed couldn't help but look at him and said, "This is an incident that the president has authorized us to investigate. I didn't expect you to catch the culprit first." Compared with other anonymous superheroes, the Fantastic Four already have 2 personnel who belong to the National Space Administration, so their identities are not only open to the public, but also often help the official government deal with many problems. It can be said that, apart from SHIELD on the dark side and the upcoming Avengers organization, the closest superhero to the government is the Fantastic Four. Only. Just hand over the murder to the other party? Gulay has mixed feelings in her heart. It should be said that the murderer should be handed over to the other government, but the conspiracy behind Nightcrawler involved General Stryker, the mutant registration bill, and a series of inactions that made her a little distrustful of the government. She was still in hesitation, and Suchin immediately understood her thoughts at a glance. "Needless to say, I won't hand it over to you, please return it." Suchin declined very confidently. Ching glanced at him and knew that she was helping herself to make a decision. She heard the words and stood by her side confidently and said, "This is impossible, I can tell you. General Stryker has a big problem, and I have reason to believe this Nightcrawler it's the puppet he controls, so it's hard for me to trust you." "That's nothing to say?" Johnny of Human Torch spread his hands indifferently. Compared with the fireman of Xavier Academy, this guy who can burn himself and is immune to fire is worthy of the name of a fire expert, and definitely has a personality. Very naughty. Why don't we just grab it directly? He came up with a bad idea, and his body was still eager to try. With a bitter look on his face, Reed continued, "If the general really has a problem, I'm sure I will give you justice. Sorry, I prefer to hold it in my hand rather than trusting others." Suchin smiled, just like the unparalleled Superman is not bad at intellectual activities, but many things can be easily solved with just a fist. Rather than handing things over to a group of strangers, Suchin prefers to decide his own destiny. "No, we should." Reed was about to say something, but was interrupted by Johnny. "I really don't understand, just do it directly, what else to say?" As soon as he finished speaking, the Human Torch came towards him and grabbed Nightcrawler, who was lying on the ground, with one hand. However, in an instant, his body was lifted upside down and suddenly fell to the ground. Episode 41. No backhand. Before reaching out to touch Nightcrawler's body, Johnny's body was suddenly lifted and smashed to the ground. Damn. Johnny Torch is not a vegetarian either. He has a fiery personality without saying a word. His 2 fingers suddenly spewed out a ball of fireworks towards Suchin in front of him. At the same time, he jumped back in the air. Facing the fireworks within reach, Suchin smiled, but with a light hand wave, the fireworks flew out with surging strength. Johnny, who jumped to several positions in the air, looked angry, his arms burned directly, and two fire dragons meandered and swept towards Su Chen in front of him. It's all boring. Su Chen just increased his strength and slashed with his arm, completely destroying the two swept fire dragons. At the moment, Johnny, whose whole body was burned into a torch, had already risen into the air with a bang, and his hands were about to launch the next wave of attacks, but at this moment, the figure under his eyes suddenly bent his legs and his vision became wider and wider. The closer he gets, the entire figure fills the entire line of sight in an instant. Before he had time to dodge, a punch came. Johnny only felt like he was hit by a train. With a bang, he fell directly from the air to the ground. Johnny. The invisible woman, Susan, who was her sister, was anxious. Her eyes looked at the figure slowly falling and touching the ground with grief and indignation. She stretched out her hands, and a vast psychokinesis pressed on Su Chen's body, trying to imprison his actions. Seeing Susan, who was very struggling, Mr. Fantastic Reed sighed helplessly, his entire body stretched to an incredible length, like a long blanket, and rolled up Su Chen's body with his hands and feet all at once. Went around several times. This is the ability of Mr. Fantastic. With super elasticity, the whole body can be straightened arbitrarily, and it can also change its size and shape through elasticity, just like Luffy. Feeling the rising power of the opponent gradually arousing, Reed looked at Su Chen and shook his head, and said, "My body is immune to physical attacks, so don't do any more unnecessary conflicts." In addition, there is Susan, who focuses on psychokinesis to put pressure on it. Human Torch Johnny, who was lying on the ground, stood up angrily, and his body gradually burst into flames again, and the momentum was about to start fighting again. "Johnny, we're not here to fight." Reed stopped him, and Susan, who was constantly pressing psychokinesis, stared at her naughty and willful ass. In addition, the stone man on the side was staring at Jean Grey and Katie, and he said, "Ladies, we are here with good intentions, don't try to stop it, or I can't guarantee that it will hurt you." After speaking, his body slowly walked towards Nightcrawler's side, ready to carry him away, while Jean and Katie just watched with a hint of mockery in their eyes. At this moment, a disdainful word floated out, "Is this your strength?" Reed, who was entangled in Su Chen with his body, was startled, feeling the pressure from the surrounding body, and couldn't help but say, "We're not here." Before he could finish speaking, it was Su Chen's arms that used a burst of strength to pull away the rubber body that had wrapped around him layer by layer. The air wall that was pressurizing all around could not further hinder his movement. Although Reed was immune to physical attacks, but he couldn't rely on the control of this huge force. In a blink of an eye, Su Chen broke free from the bondage. Seeing this, Reed, who still didn't give up and tried to entangle himself, Su Chen smiled, "It seems that it's time for you to make up your chemistry class, so you can guess that the rubber is encountering high temperature or ultra-low temperature. What will happen when?" "Mr." Reed's heart trembled, and the body that was trying to retreat was still a step slower. In an instant, a blast of frost suddenly sprayed out of Su Chen's mouth, the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly, and the cold freezing air instantly stretched most of the body out. The body froze directly. "What?" Reed's face instantly became uncomfortable. His body was really like rubber. When it encountered high temperature or ultra-low temperature, it immediately lost its activity, and the whole person was almost immediately paralyzed, unable to move. This is the huge flaw behind his ability. Johnny over there didn't hold back when he saw the opportunity, and his body gradually burned again, and he rushed forward immediately, but Su Chen had already prepared, and the other frosty breath that had not been sprayed was left to the person in front of him. Swish! Another extremely cold freezing air poured out, and Johnny not only spread out the fireworks on his body, but also adhered to the ground like an ice sculpture. "Johnny." Susan couldn't help but get anxious. But suddenly, a thought broke into her mind, and Jean Grey's voice echoed directly in her mind, "I think if I were you, I wouldn't mess around anymore." Susan swallowed, only to find that her back was covered in sweat. Although the stone man was honest and loyal, he was also a short-tempered guy. At the moment, he saw a group of mates being beaten so hard that they couldn't help but rush forward. Like its nickname, the person is covered with stone-like blocks, and the momentum of rushing over is very huge. Every step of falling causes a lot of movement, as if a train is rushing at full speed. Su Chen is not afraid to compete with others for strength, and he is also happy to play with strength, because strength is the easiest way to solve problems. His body didn't move, but he just stretched out his hands to catch the rushing huge body. The huge momentum was unable to shake Su Chen. His arms were slightly bulging, and he grabbed the stone man, and then violently tossed. Bang! The grounded plane was sunk by itself, and the stone man wailed, but it only felt like it was falling apart, and it took most of the effort to move a finger. For a while, the Fantastic Four lost their combat effectiveness without any backhand. Episode 42. Cut the grass and remove the roots. Okay, now you should have no objections, Su Chen said. The Fantastic Four, who were still in high spirits just now, completely lost their combat effectiveness. Reed, who was frozen and inactive, was paralyzed and unable to move. Susan was also unable to move due to the mind fluctuations. As for her brother Johnny, it turned into an ice sculpture. The stoneman suffered a lot, and he felt that his internal organs were displaced, and he was too lazy to lift a finger. Look at what you were proud of just now. Katie smiled. The stone man smiled bitterly when he saw this. It turned out that the two ladies just stood by and looked at each other with cold eyes. No doubt they were based on Su Chen's strength, and they were just humiliating themselves. Okay, let's go, Qin Gulei said. The engine of the Blackbird fighter jet sprayed blue fireworks. As the driver, Qin was skillful in taking the right position. Susan, who had regained her autonomy, did not make any drastic actions, but just watched helplessly as they boarded the plane. Fortunately, the other party didn't kill him. Reed and Johnny were only frozen for a while, and the stone man didn't hurt his bones. Instead, the trouble now is that their flight device was severely damaged, and the light maintenance and repair is a long time. But now, they have been living on the edge of a desert town in Brazil, and the other party is obviously not willing to take them for a ride. Hey, how do we get back? The stone man shouted loudly, waving his hands towards the black bird that rose far into the air. Susan also smiled bitterly. Let Reed and the others take a breath and talk about it. Unexpectedly, catching the prisoner who assassinated the president encountered such a big trouble. And in the air. The Blackbird fighter jet burst out of the air, and the neat lines felt like a blackbird, passing by in the air. Jean Grey in the cockpit was in control of the plane and said casually, "Let's go back to the academy now, the Fantastic Four won't be able to catch up with us for a while." Katie thought about it a lot, and said, "It seems that there is still trouble going back. I feel that this assassination incident was deliberate, and took the opportunity to attack us mutant." This is indeed the case. This White House assassination incident was written by General Stryker. He was not only reused for this, but even the attitude of the social fishing boat and even the White House government towards mutant became bad, and Stryker's power was further expanded. Jean pursed her lips and said a little stingly, "I believe that publishing the truth about Nightcrawler to the president may be able to stop this hatred." Maybe not? Su Chen asked rhetorically. What do you mean? What I mean is to fly directly to Canada, find Nightcrawler's memory and rush to Stryker's hidden lair, and then wipe it out in one fell swoop. Ah. Jean couldn't help being taken aback by this bold plan. I said that the most important trouble is this Stryker. If you really want mutant to live well, then you will completely humanely destroy this extremely hated guy. Su Chen said sharply. Even if you really convince them with the help of another murderer behind the scenes, Stryker will not die for a day, and the ghost that hates mutant will always be hovering over mutant. To solve the root cause of everything, it will definitely be less troublesome to solve him directly. Su Chen said. Killing Stryker, destroying his nest, simple and rude, this is his character. He will not hand over his fate to others for judgment, and everything must be firmly in his own hands. Definitely, this is also because he has unrivaled strength to back it up. After listening, Jean was silent for a while, and finally the Blackbird helicopter deviated from the destination and flew in the other direction. Listen to you. Listening to Jean's resolute words, Su Chen couldn't help but outline a smile, and Shadowcat Katie on the side was eager to try, and could not wait to reach the battlefield in the next moment. Little girl, come closer to me. Su Chen pinched her nose and said. Katie stuck out her tongue and said sweetly, Don't worry, although I don't have much combat power, but I am safe, and the whole academy is not as strong as me. This is true, Shadowcat Katie has the ability to penetrate all obstacles, and she can easily integrate into the walls and bullets that she encounters. And Jean, Su Chen is not worried. This is the host of Phoenix Force. After years of tempering, it is much stronger than in his own impression. The two variants of ability, psychokinesis and mind ability, are all superbly used. More importantly, Su Chen will not put the two people around him in deep danger. He is the biggest safety guarantee by his side. Less than 20 minutes. This high-tech engine aircraft has broken through the speed of sound and quickly came to the sky above a snowfield in Canada. The unique invisible treatment coating makes the fighter jets do not need to worry about the air alarm in the homeland. It's here. Right under their noses was the rumored Lake Alkali, where Nightcrawler's memory had led them to. Coincidentally, this lake fits Wolverine Logan's memory very well. He even came here not long ago, but he found nothing. Logan didn't find anything here? Logically speaking, the base where he was imprisoned should not be a lake. Jin was a little puzzled, but Nightcrawler's memory pointed here again, which obviously showed that this was unusual. Place. A glimmer of light flashed in Su Chen's eyes. He withdrew his gaze, and said to them, "Park the plane, find it, it's right below." Underneath. Sheen's face was a little puzzled. There was only a mirror-smooth lake and a barren snowfield. What else was left? It is a genius idea to build under the dam, and under the whole lake is their hidden base. Pity. But it was still no match for Su Chen's eyes. Episode 43. Raid. Everything is visible, and nothing can hide from Su Chen's eyes. Under the dam of Lake Alkali is the military base that General Stryker has been operating for a long time. It is no wonder that Logan has found nothing here. After all, no one can think of a base hidden under the lake. Definitely, the Blackbird fighter, which had been patrolling for a long time, appeared so swaggeringly over the sky, and it could not help but be discovered by the base's reconnaissance. But Su Chen didn't care, just let Qin Gulei stop the Blackbird steadily on the snow field beside the forest. When the hatch is open. Whoosh! A whistling sounded. There was a sniper bullet that broke through the air and came straight towards the figure on the hatch. I saw Su Chen just sticking out his right hand and pinching the unique armor-piercing sniper bullet with his fingers. The bullet that was enough to penetrate the steel armor was firmly squeezed by him, and then he flicked his finger, and another whistling sounded in the air. A bullet goes through. It was at this time. Figures in white snowcoats stood up from the snowfield, the guns on their bodies were loaded one after another, and the sound of machine guns resounded one after another. Qin took a deep breath, took a step forward, raised her right hand slightly, and a wave of thoughts swept out, and the bullets flying around instantly stagnated in mid-air, making it difficult to move. With a slow push of the right hand, the stagnant bullets flew out one after another, and swept towards them as they returned. In a blink of an eye, there was a burst of scarlet blood in the snowfield, and the falling snowflakes could not completely cover it up, and there was a faint smell of blood in the air. "Mr. Qin, that's great," Katie called out like a salted fish who could only call 666. "What should I do next?" Qin took a sigh of relief and looked at Su Chen. Before she knew it, she had already regarded him as the backbone. Su Chen pointed forward unhurriedly. "We entered the base along the sluice passage. There is the nearest road. Did you see the gate? Behind the gate is the interior of the Stryker base." But Qin was a little puzzled. The narrow sluice channel was obviously used to vent the water accumulated in the dam. They just walked along the waterway, not afraid that the other party would directly open the sluice and release the water. Qin's worry is not unreasonable. The only exit of the Stryker base is very tricky. When encountering an unidentified enemy, you can directly open the gate to release the flood and wash people away completely. You know, it is very difficult to be trapped in such a waterway. Run out. But Su Chen wasn't too worried. As long as he smashes through this gate, he dares to release the flood, and he will drown his base together, so I will smash through this gate now. After Su Chen finished speaking, he still told Katie, "Follow me closely. Behind, protect Teacher Qin when necessary." Katie nodded hurriedly. This adventure kept her heart high, but thinking that Su Chen was by her side, the two of them would not be in any danger. As soon as he finished speaking, Su Chen's figure disappeared in place. It was like a sharp arrow that flew out after the bowstring was fully stretched. The fleeting speed made him jump several kilometers in an instant and came directly to the gate in Hongdao. The poised punch had no pretense at all, and a simple straight punch slammed into the steel gate in front of him. Bang! Like the sound of a morning bell and a drum, it instantly rang in my ears. The steel gate, which was strong enough to withstand the impact of the flood, was actually sunken inward by most of it. Not only that, but the impacted part was even cracked, and the entire metal doorframe retreated a few centimeters. Bang! In less than a second, another punch flew out. The power of venting is incomparable. If this gate can resist the flood, then the power of this punch is far more than that of the flood. With a bang, the metal gate with a thickness of about half a meter was knocked open. Behind the metal gate, there was a group of soldiers in military uniforms. They stared blankly at the unarmed enemy appearing in front of them. It seemed that their behavior just now shocked them so much that they forgot to shoot. Bastard, what are you still doing? After being reminded by the superior, these talents suddenly realized the trigger, the dark muzzle burst into blue light, and the whistling bullets swept through the death trails, interweaving to the enemy in front of them. But the bullet actually splattered a trace of sparks on his body, and the bullet that was enough to penetrate the body could not penetrate his skin. Tickle? Su Chen laughed. After that, the figure was like electricity, and it crashed into everyone's eyeballs at close range in an instant. The lightning-fast action was dazzling. In less than a second, several people were killed under his fist. Every punch and leg directly produced the effect of a cannonball impact. An uppercut came and sent a figure crashing into the ceiling, and swept away with one leg, and a figure was knocked out nearly 100 meters away. Unarmed, but every move is more daunting than a cannonball. Gradually, the soldiers who were obstructed outside the door were cleaned up in an instant. On the ground were figures who fell to the ground in embarrassment. What made Zhang Deku even more was that there were many human bodies inlaid on the walls. The force is hard and concave into the metal steel layer, which makes people fear the strength. For a while, the enemy's traces were lost at the entrance of the entire base. Qin and Katie also rushed to their side at the first time, and the strong smell of blood made them smack their tongues, but Qin Gray couldn't take this into account. She said, "There are a lot of mutants trapped here. I think it's time to let them out." "Well, you like it." Su Chen pointed to the front. "The prison is in front, you go." "How about you?" "Someone is coming towards me. I definitely have to be patient and wait." Su Chen smiled, seeing a woman in military uniform at the end of the passage in front of her. Episode 44. Master of Illusion Jason. At the end of the long corridor, there was a woman in a military uniform, with an extremely cold complexion, a tall stature, and an air of refusal all over her body. Su Chen squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "With such a big base, you are the only woman who can stand up." "Well, it seems that there is still a backbone." The voice did not fall. A strong wind came from Su Chen's ears, and there was a masked figure in the surrounding area. At the same time, the long samurai sword rolled up in his hand slashed horizontally at Su Chen's neck. The sharp blade radiated an extreme cold light under the light. It was only by the slightest margin that 2 fingers pinched the samurai sword, and the invisible ninja figure blushed, unable to go any further. Click! With the force of just 2 fingers, the samurai sword broke. At the same time, in less than a second, Su Chen closed his fingers into fists, and Su Chen slammed forward with a punch. The masked ninja in front of him couldn't help but shatter his facial bones, and then his entire head exploded like a broken watermelon. Red and white filth spread all over the place. "It's right to have backbone, but death is inevitable." Su Chen laughed. The sound of high-heeled boots landing suddenly came, but the woman on the opposite end rushed up without saying a word. Clang! A sharp sound rang out, and the woman's hands in front of her had 10 extra claws, which were slender and sharp. In a blink of an eye, the sound of high-heeled boots was approaching, and the lady grabbed her hands forward suddenly. Su Chen chuckled and leaned slightly to the side, letting the 10 shockingly slender claws pass, the sharp claws that were avoided. He couldn't help slashing to the wall, and there were actually several cracks that were several feet deep. "Girls are so ruthless, but you are also very courageous, so you are close to me?" As soon as Su Chen finished speaking, the lady on the other end couldn't help but slashed horizontally with her claws, but it was just a short distance away from her reach, but a fist hit her 1 step ahead. The whole swaying and colorful body could not help but twist and twist inexplicably, and then slammed into the wall behind him. What Su Chen admired was that there was no emotion at all on that glamorous face from beginning to end, as if he had left everything behind. Painful neural responses. But the punch was really too painful. If the lady in front of her is not a dead woman with self-healing ability, I am afraid that this punch will completely rupture her lumbar spine and completely die. The female version of Wolverine in front of her is indeed a bit extraordinary. The recovery speed is very fast. Although her face is still very ugly, she has once again gained a bit of combat power. But Su Chen didn't have a chance with her at all, and smashed her into the wall with another punch. After this punch, the dead woman's eyes, which had no emotional fluctuations, could not help revealing a feeling of pain that I felt pity for. Compared with the frosty expression just now, it was a little more human. "Looks like you're under control, too." Needless to say, this dead woman was just a puppet under Stryker's potion. That trace of painful human feelings disappeared in a flash, and the dead woman became cold again, and the continued healing of her injuries forced her to want to take further action. Suchin was too lazy to tangle with this poor woman, and continued to slam her body into the wall. When she inserted her right hand to the side of the wall, a large section of concrete steel bars were pulled out from the wall. Under the pressure of his strength, he kept shapeshifting and tied it directly to the waist of the dead woman, forcing her to no longer be able to leave the wall. Okay, that's it. Suchin clapped his hands and continued to move towards the corridor in front of him, leaving behind a back that was gradually receding. The dead woman who was almost embedded in the wall struggled hard, but it was difficult to get rid of the steel bars buried in the wall for a while, but a pair of eyes looking at the distant back were full of resentment and anger. If Suchin sees it, she will be amazed. After all, she finally has a taste of emotion. Obviously, the effect of controlling her is gradually fading. Looking for his super hearing perception, Suchin has been firmly locking the positions of Chin and Katie to ensure their personal safety. At the same time, he is receiving chaotic information from the outside world. The imprisoned mutants were also rudely unlocked by Chin Galei with psychokinesis, and they were completely released one by one. Everyone, let me go to the door outside. Chin's voice resounded in the passage, and the claustrophobic space made the voice echo and linger. There are still many gunshots resounding one after another, the soldiers who are resisting. Those mutants who were released had all suffered a certain amount of torture. At the moment they were released, and they hated these soldiers even more, and an uncontrolled slaughter began from this. Suchin strolled in the passage of the underground base, passing mutants in white prison uniforms from time to time, but these mutants with blood on their hands just passed by, and they didn't even dare to look at them. Because in less than half a minute, a good mutant has been smashed into the ground, abruptly smashed into a huge amount of pit. This time, he was shocked, but he didn't dare to let these mutants who fled in a hurry have trouble again. Are you all right? Chin Galei asked with concern. This should be me asking you. Suchin laughed. We're okay, all the firepower was attracted by you. Katie also cleaned the base control room completely, and released most of the mutants in the prison cell, but we can't find General Stryker. Chin said a little disappointed. Suchin nodded. Under his own perception, he did not find Stryker's figure. Presumably, the sudden attack caused the general to escape. It's not without gain, though, Jean said. I should have found the source of all evil that Stryker-controlled mutant. It's his son Jason, known as the Master of Illusion. In the secret room in front, even with my spiritual ability, I dare not approach, the whole room is distorted by his ability. Episode 45. Familiar figure. Jason used to be a student at Xavier College. He is a mutant who can create illusions to control people's brains, and those medicines that control mutant must be the extraction of his ability. But I never thought that Stryker would even spare his own son. Chin sighed helplessly. Suchin knows the sadness behind this. There are many people in mutant who can't freely retract their abilities. For example, Scott can't take away the hot gaze of his eyes, and Jason can't control his abilities at all, but he has no similar. A pair of glasses helped him adjust, but he could only let it get out of control. His parents, the Stryker couple, suffered a lot of torture from him, and a more serious accident caused his biological mother to dig out his own head. It's bloody, and that's what makes Stryker so hostile to mutant. Chin seemed to have thought of that piece of history too, and finally sighed. Anyway, for mutant's future, he must die. The potion extracted from the brain of the illusion master Jason can indirectly control mutant to become his own. This is simply too terrifying and terrifying. It not only reduces mutant to slaves, but also further suppresses mutants' living environment. Therefore, even Chin Galei, who has always been gentle with others, firmly believes that this illusion master must be eliminated. It's just, that guy is really hard to get close to. Give it to me. After Suchin finished speaking, he gradually walked to the front of the secret room, pushed open the half-closed door, and saw a thin and frail young man lying in a wheelchair. His face was blurred, and his cloudy eyes were empty. Just like a walking dead. There are several people who have entered here by mistake, but now their expressions are the same as dementia, and their faces are swaying around. As soon as he walked in here, Suchin frowned. He could clearly feel a sense of reason constantly invading his mind, and a voice from nowhere whispered in his ears. The Kryptonians need to be rescued. The surrounding environment suddenly blurred, and for a moment there was a vast space in front of me. A galaxy was slowly burning, that is, Krypton was collapsing into a singularity, and then swept across the entire civilization. Looking at the destruction of this civilization, Su Chen's body was involuntarily rushing forward. When he opened his eyes again, the space in front of him had disappeared, and it was just a thick wall. Obviously, this illusion master still had something. You must know that Charles, who is as strong as the master of the mind, could not help but be regarded as a puppet by him. Manipulate. Interesting. Su Chen shook his head, and his sanity was much clearer. The next second, his figure was no longer in place, and the fleeting figure was wrapped in a breath of energy, which was suddenly vented on Jason's body. Bang! The figure in the wheelchair was directly knocked out for dozens of meters, until it hit the ceiling in the distance, and the body was covered in blood. His head, without much effort, smashed the whole head. The magic sound lingering in the ear also disappeared completely, and those troubled thoughts finally disappeared. If this guy hadn't lost his mind and had no action at all, he would definitely be a lot more troublesome than Charles, and more terrifying than the so-called Omega mutant. Definitely, the so-called Omega level only means that the ability qualification is very good. It does not mean that their current strength is very terrifying, like today's Iceman is too weak to resist Omega's rating. Su Chen sighed and walked outside. At the passage outside, the shadow of military resistance has gradually disappeared. Except for the illusion master Jason with special ability, and mutants such as Death Woman, the entire underground base has no conspicuous threat. I found some important documents, which are experimental documents left by the base. I think it should always be able to retain the sympathy of some social fishing boats. Katie, who came out of the control room, waved the documents and said. Qin took the document and glanced at it several times, only to see that it was all mutants' anatomy experiments, which made her frown angrily. Fortunately, there is Nightcrawler's related plan, which is enough to be a very important evidence. I don't believe that these things are published, and Stryker will not be ruined. Qin Gri said. Okay, we're ready to go too. Qin Goulet also nodded in agreement. The huge military base was captured and occupied by them. How to deal with mutant in the follow-up is a new problem. Looking at a beautiful figure walking out of the cell, Qin frowned. She seemed to feel a sense of familiarity from it. No. Logically, she should be dead.